Before we descend into the labyrinth of shadows, deception, and the high-stakes game of intelligence played out in the ancient alleys of Damascus, please make sure to subscribe to the channel. We are exposing the operations that governments deny and the machinery of power that operates in perpetual shadow. Hit the notification bell. The next buried operation is already unfolding somewhere, waiting to be revealed. The heat in Damascus does not just sit on you, it presses down like a heavy, dusty wool blanket. It was mid-July 2008. In the Souk al-Hamidiyya, the air was thick with the scent of cardamom, roasting nuts, and the exhaust of 1,000 ancient taxis idling just beyond the covered market's entrance. Elias, known to the local merchants as Thomas Weber, a Swiss antiquities restoration consultant, wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead with a linen handkerchief. He sat at a small, wobbly table outside a cafe, nursing a cup of tea that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. To the casual observer, he was just another European expatriate, perhaps a bit bored, watching the world go by. But Elias was not bored. He was hunting. His eyes, hidden behind dark aviator sunglasses, were locked on the entrance to the Umayyad Mosque, the great mosque of Damascus. This was one of the holiest sites in the Islamic world, a place of stunning architectural beauty, and, according to the encrypted burst transmission Elias had received from Tel Aviv 6 hours ago, the current operating base of the Engineer. The Engineer was a ghost. Intelligence agencies across the globe, the CIA, MI6, the DGSE, had files on him that were thick with speculation and thin on facts. He was a master bomb maker for a splinter faction of a radical group, a man who didn't just build explosives. He turned ordinary objects into instruments of devastation. He was the reason a cafe in Beirut had vanished the previous year. He was the reason a diplomat's car in Jordan had disintegrated. And now, he was here. Elias watched the crowd. Pilgrims, tourists, and locals flowed like a river. He was looking for a specific anomaly. Deep cover work, like that of the legendary Wolfgang Lotz, requires more than just a fake passport. It requires an understanding of the rhythm of a city. Lotz had charmed Cairo's elite by becoming one of them. Elias had spent 2 years becoming a fixture of the Damascus restoration community. He knew the stonemasons, the tile workers, and the guards. At 14:05, the anomaly appeared. It wasn't the engineer, it was a courier. A young man, nervous, clutching a leather satchel too tightly to his chest. He didn't look at the minarets or the mosaics. He looked at his feet. He moved with a speed that suggested he was late or frightened. Elias tapped the side of his glasses. It was a habitual tick, but today it signaled his support team. Somewhere in a van miles away, or perhaps in a satellite feed monitored in a bunker in Herzliya, eyes were watching. The courier bypassed the main prayer hall entrance. Instead, he slipped through a side door reserved for maintenance staff and Waqf officials. Elias felt a cold spike of adrenaline. That door led to the administrative wing, a labyrinth of offices and storage rooms built into the ancient Roman walls of the complex. If the intelligence was correct, the engineer wasn't just hiding in Damascus, he was operating from inside the mosque complex itself. It was the perfect cover. The sanctity of the site made it a political minefield. No Western power would dare drop a bomb on the Umayyad Mosque. No local security force would raid it without absolute, undeniable proof, for fear of sparking a religious uprising. It was a sanctuary in the truest sense, and that was why Mossad had to act. Elias stood up, leaving enough Syrian pounds on the table to cover the tea and a generous tip. He adjusted his linen jacket. He wasn't carrying a gun. He wasn't carrying a radio. His weapon was his legend, his cover story. He walked toward the maintenance entrance. The guard, a heavy-set man named Hisham who had a weakness for Swiss chocolate, nodded as Elias approached. "Mr. Thomas?" Hisham grunted, leaning on his rifle. "Working late? The tile work in the western corridor won't restore itself, Hisham." Elias smiled, producing a bar of Toblerone from his pocket with the practiced ease of a magician. "I need to check the moisture levels before the evening humidity sets in." Hisham took the chocolate, his eyes lighting up. "Go ahead, but stay out of the North Annex. The Waqf officials are having a meeting. Very serious." "I am invisible," Elias promised. He slipped past the guard and into the cool, stone corridor. The sounds of the market faded, replaced by the hushed echo of the holy site. Elias moved silently, his shoes rubber-soled. He wasn't heading to the western corridor. He was heading north. He needed to confirm the target. He needed to know if the man destroying the peace of the region was truly hiding behind the walls of prayer. As he turned a corner, he heard voices. Low, urgent. He pressed himself into an alcove behind a pillar. Two men walked past. One was the courier. The other was older, bearded, wearing the robes of a scholar, but walking with the limp of a soldier. Elias held his breath. He had memorized the few grainy photos that existed. The limp matched. The profile matched. It was him, the engineer. Elias waited until they disappeared into a heavy wooden door at the end of the hall. He glanced at his watch. 14:12. The cell was active. The location was confirmed. Now came the hard part. How do you neutralize a target inside a building that cannot be touched? Elias turned and walked back toward the exit, his mind already racing through the options. This wouldn't be a simple hit. It couldn't be a sniper shot, and it couldn't be a raid. It had to be something else, something invisible, something that looked like the hand of God or a tragic accident. As he stepped back into the blinding sunlight of the souk, Elias knew one thing. The machinery of assassination had been set in motion, just as it had been for Mahmoud al-Khalid on the train to Rome. But this time, the stakes were higher. This time, the whole world was watching. To understand the operation, one must understand the man at its center. Elias was a ghost long before he arrived in Syria. Born in a kibbutz in northern Israel, he had an ear for languages that bordered on the supernatural. By 20, he spoke Arabic with a native fluency that could mimic the dialects of Cairo, Beirut, or Damascus. By 25, he was a graduate of the Mossad's training academy, the Midrasha. His cover identity, his legend, had been constructed with the same meticulous detail used for Wolfgang Lotz decades earlier. Mossad's research department had spent 2 years building Thomas Weber. Thomas was born in Zurich to a Swiss father and a Lebanese mother. This explained his fluency in Arabic and his European mannerisms. Documents were forged: birth certificates, university transcripts from ETH Zurich, tax records. A bank account was established in Geneva with a history of transactions that looked painfully ordinary. But a legend is more than paper. It is a life lived. Elias spent 6 months in Zurich, learning the city, frequenting cafes, creating a digital footprint. He took courses in chemical preservation of stone and ancient masonry. He learned to talk about grout and limestone with the passion of a fanatic. When he arrived in Damascus in 2006, he didn't come as a spy. He came as a businessman. He set up a consultancy firm, Weber Restoration. He hired a local secretary. He paid his taxes to the Syrian government. He attended the expatriate parties in the upscale Malki district, complaining about the heat and the bureaucracy. He was boring. And being boring is the best camouflage in the world. During the day he worked. He actually consulted on restoration projects. He walked the roofs of the old city inspecting water damage. He gained access to government buildings, museums, and historical sites. At night, Thomas Weber disappeared and Elias emerged. In his apartment, hidden beneath the floorboards of a closet, was a high-frequency transmitter, similar to the one Lotz had used concealed in a lantern, but technology had advanced. Elias's device was encrypted, burst transmission capable, and disguised as the internal components of a high-end stereo amplifier. He reported on troop movements, the mood of the populace, and the rumors swirling in the souks. But his primary mission was always the same: find the deep infrastructure of the terror networks using Damascus as a safe harbor. The discovery of the cell in the Umayyad Mosque had been a slow burn. It started with a whisper at a diplomatic reception. A Syrian general, drunk on Iraq, had bragged about a special guest being hosted by the Waqf authorities, a man who was teaching the resistance new tricks. Elias had tugged at that thread. He tracked the general's driver. He monitored the deliveries of food to the mosque's administrative wing. He noticed that certain shipments, electronics, chemicals, were being marked as cleaning supplies. The confirmation in the souk that afternoon was the final piece of the puzzle. But the complexity of the target required a different kind of preparation. That evening, Elias sat in his apartment, the windows open to catch the night breeze. He turned on his stereo, playing classical music loud enough to vibrate the windows, a countermeasure against laser microphones. He opened his laptop. It looked like a standard business machine, but the operating system was anything but. He initiated a secure chat with Center. Elias, target confirmed, visual ID positive. Location, North Annex, room 4B. Access is restricted. Hisham, guard, is permeable, but limited. Center, understood, assessing options. Kinetic strike ruled out. Sovereignty violation risk, extreme. Collateral damage tolerance, 0. Elias, they are moving supplies in. I suspect a workshop. If he is the engineer, he is not just hiding, he is building. Center, priority upgraded to red. We cannot allow production to finish. You need a closer look. We need to know what he is making. Elias closed the laptop. A closer look. That meant getting inside the room where the engineer was guarded by loyalists, inside a holy site, in the capital of an enemy state. He walked to the window and looked out at the lights of Damascus climbing up the slopes of Mount Kassioun. The city was ancient, a survivor of Mongols, Crusaders, and Ottomans. It kept its secrets well. He thought of the story of Eli Cohen, the spy who had almost become Syria's deputy defense minister before he was caught and hanged in Marjah Square, not far from where Elias now stood. The shadow of Cohen hung over every operative in Damascus. "Don't get comfortable," he whispered to himself. He went to his bookshelf and pulled down a heavy volume on Islamic architecture. Inside the hollowed-out spine was a small velvet pouch. He poured the contents onto the table. Lock picks, a tiny fiber optic camera, a device that looked like a car key but was actually a cloner for RFID cards. Tools of the trade. The legend of Thomas Weber was about to be put to the test. He had to convince the Mosque authorities that the North Annex was in critical danger of structural failure. He had to invent a crisis to solve a crisis. He spent the rest of the night drafting a fake report on rising damp and salt crystallization in the Umayyad North Wall. It was a masterpiece of technical boredom. It was his ticket in. Nabil Al-Fayed, known to the intelligence world as the engineer, did not sleep much. He believed that sleep was a surrender. In the small windowless room deep within the mosque's administrative complex, Nabil worked under the harsh glare of a halogen lamp. The room was soundproofed with heavy rugs hung on the walls. The air smelled of solder, acetone, and the sharp tang of high-grade explosives. Nabil was a small man, unassuming. If you passed him on the street, you would mistake him for a clerk or a school teacher. But his hands were steady, and his mind was a labyrinth of circuitry and chemistry. He was not interested in politics, not really. He was interested in impact. He viewed his bombs as messages, as a form of communication more powerful than any speech. On the table before him lay his masterpiece. It wasn't a suicide vest. Those were crude, the tools of desperate children. This was sophisticated. It was a directional mine, disguised within the casing of a standard commercial generator. The plan was audacious. The generator was to be shipped to the border region, to a facility used by international peacekeepers. When activated, it wouldn't just explode. It would shape the blast wave to cut through armored vehicles like a hot knife through butter. How long? A voice came from the shadows in the corner of the room. Nabil didn't look up. He was soldering a connection on the detonator board. Perfection takes time, brother. Do you want it to work, or do you want a firecracker? The man in the corner stepped forward. He was tall, scarred, a veteran of conflicts in Iraq and Chechnya. He was the cell leader, the muscle to Nabil's brain. His name was Rahim. "The window is closing," Rahim said. "The shipment leaves in 3 days. If the device isn't ready, we miss the convoy." "It will be ready," Nabil said quietly. "But I need one more component. The mercury switch. The one from the old Soviet stockpile. The local ones are unreliable." Rahim scowled. "We are in a mosque, Nabil, not a hardware store. Getting things in and out is risky. The Swiss man, the one who checks the walls. I saw him talking to Hisham today." Nabil paused. He set down the soldering iron. "The Swiss? The restorer?" "Yes. He asks too many questions. He looks at things he shouldn't." Nabil rubbed his chin. "A restorer looks at cracks, Rahim. We are cracks in the system. Of course he looks. Is he a threat? I don't know. But in our line of work, doubt is a death sentence." "Don't touch him," Nabil ordered. "Not yet." If a European disappears in Damascus, the police will turn this city upside down. We cannot afford that scrutiny. Just watch him. If he gets too close, then we deal with him." Nabil turned back to his work. He felt safe here. The thick stone walls of the Umayyad Mosque had stood for 1,000 years. They had survived earthquakes and fires. They would protect him. He didn't know that 3 miles away, in a darkened apartment, a man named Elias was reading a report about salt crystallization and planning to bring those walls down, figuratively speaking. The engineer picked up a small vial of liquid, dimethylmercury, highly toxic. It was the same substance used in the assassination on the train to Rome. It was efficient, silent, and deadly. He wasn't using it for poison, though. He was using it as a trigger mechanism, a tilt switch that would detonate the device if the generator was moved even a fraction of a degree once armed. 3 days, Nabil whispered to the machine. Then you will sing. Meanwhile, Elias was facing his own deadline. The response from center had been clear. The target wasn't just Nabil, it was the device. Intelligence indicated a mass casualty event was being planned. Elias sat in a cafe near the mosque the next morning, watching the entrance. He needed to get his equipment inside, but security had tightened. He saw Rahim standing near the maintenance gate, watching the street. Rahim had the look of a predator. Elias knew he couldn't walk in with a bag of spy gear. He needed a Trojan horse. He finished his coffee and walked to his office. He called his secretary, a sharp young woman named Layla. "Layla, get me the Ministry of Antiquities on the phone," Elias said, his voice projecting the perfect mix of Swiss efficiency and annoyance. "Tell them I have found a critical structural fault in the Umayyad North Wall. Tell them if we don't install monitoring equipment within 24 hours, the frescoes could be lost." It was a lie, but it was a magnificent one. It played on the two things Syrian bureaucrats feared most, losing face and losing history. Within an hour, he had his permit. An official letter, stamped and signed, authorizing Thomas Weber and team to install seismic vibration sensors in the North Annex. The sensors, of course, were not for seismic vibrations. They were high-resolution audio and thermal bugs, developed by Unit 8200 in Tel Aviv. They were designed to listen through stone and detect the chemical signatures of explosives. The Trojan horse was ready. Now he just had to get it past the gatekeeper. The problem with surveilling a UN 300-year-old stone building is physics. Stone blocks radio signals. Thick walls absorb sound. The Umayyad Mosque was effectively a natural Faraday cage. Elias stood in the courtyard of the mosque, surrounded by his crew. 2 local laborers he hired for heavy lifting, who knew nothing of his true identity. They carried heavy plastic cases marked Hilti, precision tools. Hisham, the guard, looked at the paperwork Elias presented. He looked at the chocolate bar Elias offered. This time he didn't smile. "Rahim says no visitors in the North Annex," Hisham muttered. "Rahim is not the Ministry of Culture," Elias said, tapping the official seal on his letter. "And Rahim will not be responsible when the ceiling collapses on the Grand Mufti." "This is an emergency order, Hisham. Do you want to call the minister and tell him you stopped the work?" Hisham hesitated. In a dictatorship, authority is everything. The fear of a higher rank outweighed the fear of a local thug. "Be quick," Hisham hissed, "and stay in the corridor." Elias signaled his men. They moved into the cool shadows of the North Annex. As they walked, Elias scanned the environment. He counted steps. He noted the location of cameras, old, grainy CCTVs that likely recorded to a tape loop no one watched. They reached the section of wall adjacent to room 4B, the room where he had seen the engineer enter. "Set up here," Elias ordered his men. "Drill into the mortar joints. Minimal dust." While the men set up the drilling rig, creating a noise that echoed through the hall, Elias inspected the wall. He moved closer to the door of room 4B. He pulled a device from his pocket that looked like a laser distance measurer. He pressed it against the door frame. It wasn't measuring distance. It was a contact microphone. He put an earpiece in his ear. Static. The hum of a fan. And then, voices. Switches unstable. 3 days. Shipment to the Golan. Elias's blood ran cold. The Golan. They weren't targeting peacekeepers abroad. They were targeting the border. They were planning to hit an Israeli patrol or a settlement near the ceasefire line. He needed to plant the bugs, but he couldn't just stick them on the wall. He needed them inside the wall. Drill here. Elias pointed to a spot 6 inches from the door frame, right into the stone mortar. Deep bore. We need to anchor the sensor. The laborer fired up the heavy drill. The sound was deafening. It was perfect cover. Inside room 4B, Nabil looked up, startled. What is that? Rahim drew a pistol. I told you, the Swiss. He's drilling? He's installing sensors. For the damp. Nabil listened to the grinding noise. It's too close. He's right outside. I'll handle it, Rahim growled. He moved to the door. Outside, Elias saw the door handle turn. He didn't flinch. He shouted at his worker. Careful! You're vibrating the lintel. Do you want to crack the arch? The door flew open. Rahim stood there, gun hidden behind his back, but his eyes broadcasting murder. What are you doing? Rahim barked. Elias turned, looking annoyed, holding a clipboard. I am saving this building from incompetence, and you are interrupting a delicate calibration. Who are you? Get out. Rahim stepped closer. I have a permit. Elias waved the paper. And I have a schedule. If you have an issue, take it up with the ministry. Otherwise, step back. This drill can slip. It was a gamble, a massive one. Elias was betting that Rahim wouldn't shoot a European in broad daylight with witnesses present. He was betting on the gray zone of intelligence, where spies survive by being too public to kill quietly. Rahim stared at him. He looked at the laborers, who were watching with dull interest. He looked at the drill. You have 1 hour, Rahim whispered. Then I throw you out. Permit or no permit. He slammed the door. Elias let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He turned to the worker. You heard the man. Drill. In the hole they created, Elias inserted a small cylindrical tube. It contained the microphone, a transmitter, and a battery pack, good for 48 hours. He sealed the hole with color-matched grout. It was invisible. Pack up, Elias said. We're done here. As they left the mosque, Elias felt the weight of the intel. The Golan. A massive IED. The clock was ticking. He needed to send the data. But more than that, he realized surveillance wasn't enough. They couldn't just listen to this bomb being built. They had to stop it. And they couldn't risk a raid that would turn into a bloodbath. They needed to destroy the device without destroying the mosque. They needed a surgical explosion, a malfunction, an accident. The idea formed in his mind as he walked back through the souk. It was dangerous. It was reckless. It was exactly the kind of operation the Mossad specialized in. He needed to turn the engineer's own weapon against him. Elias sat in his safe house, the audio feed from the North Annex streaming into his earpiece. The quality was surprisingly good. The stone conducted sound well once you were inside the structure. He learned 2 things that night. First, the bomb was nearly finished. It was a directional charge using C4 and ball bearings, triggered by the mercury tilt switch. Second, Nabil, the engineer, was a diabetic. He heard the conversation clearly. Rahim, eat something. Nabil, my sugar is low, I need the insulin. It's in the fridge in the staff kitchen. Rahim, I'll get the boy to bring it. The staff kitchen, a common area, shared by the terror cell and the mosque's legitimate custodial staff. Elias smiled. Everyone has a weakness. For some, it's money. For others, ideology. For Nabil Al-Fayed, it was his pancreas. But Elias couldn't poison the insulin. That was assassination, and while authorized in some cases, Center wanted the bomb destroyed. If Nabil died, the bomb would still exist, and Rahim might still find a way to use it. No, Elias needed access to the room. He needed someone on the inside. He reviewed the personnel files he had compiled on the mosque staff. He stopped at one name, Karim, the boy Rahim had mentioned. Karim was 19. He worked as a cleaner and runner for the administrative wing. His file showed he was from a poor family in the Yarmouk camp. But there was a note in his background check, a brother arrested by the Syrian Mukhabarat, secret police, 2 years ago, never seen again. Resentment, a powerful motivator. Elias knew where Karim spent his evenings, a small internet cafe in the Bab Touma district. The approach had to be subtle. Elias couldn't walk in as a Mossad agent. He had to be someone else. That evening, Elias walked into the internet cafe. He spotted Karim in a corner, playing a video game. Elias sat at the adjacent terminal. He waited. When Karim went outside for a cigarette, Elias followed. "You're the boy from the mosque," Elias said in Arabic, lighting a cigarette of his own. "The one who fetches the tea." Karim looked defensive. "I work in administration." "I've seen you," Elias said. "You work hard. They treat you like a servant." "It's a job." "It's a cage," Elias said. "I know about your brother, Karim." Karim stiffened. He looked ready to run. "Who are you? Mukhabarat?" "If I were Mukhabarat, you would already be in a cell," Elias said calmly. "I represent other interests. Interests that do not like the men occupying the North Annex. The men who treat you like a slave and who caused your brother's disappearance." It was a lie. The terror cell hadn't arrested his brother. The state had, but Elias blurred the lines. He painted the cell and the state as part of the same oppressive machine. "What do you want?" Karim whispered. "I want to play a prank on them," Elias said. "To disrupt their work. Nothing dangerous to you. Just a nuisance." "They have guns," Karim said, his voice trembling. "And you have access," Elias said. He pulled a thick envelope from his jacket. It contained $5,000 USD, a fortune for a kid from Yarmouk. "This is for your family, to get them out, to Lebanon, maybe further." Karim looked at the money. He looked at Elias. "What do I have to do?" "They keep a generator in the room," Elias said. "A backup power supply. I need you to swap a part, a simple maintenance part. It will make the generator fail. They will be annoyed. They will have to leave to fix it. That is all." Elias produced a small metallic cylinder. It looked exactly like a commercial fuel filter, but it wasn't a filter. It was a high-tech incendiary device. Inside was a chemical compound that would ignite when it reached a certain temperature, the operating temperature of the generator. But it wouldn't just burn. It contained a small, shaped charge. Not enough to bring down the building, but enough to detonate any unstable explosives sitting nearby. It was a detonator disguised as a spare part. Elias was manipulating the boy. He was using him as a mule for a device that could kill everyone in that room. It was the cold calculus of intelligence, the red page logic. One boy's risk against the lives of dozens of Israeli soldiers on the Golan. Karim took the cylinder. His hands were shaking. "Tomorrow," Elias said, "when you bring the insulin, you clean the room, you swap the part, you leave." "And the money?" "Half now, half when you come out." Karim nodded and shoved the envelope into his pocket. He ran into the night. Elias watched him go. He felt a pang of guilt, quickly suppressed. The mission came first. He returned to the safe house and message center. "Elias, asset acquired. Delivery mechanism in place. Execution scheduled for T-12 hours. Center, proceed. Warning, Mukhabarat activity increased in Sector 4. Watch your back." Elias checked his pistol, a compact Glock 19 hidden in a hollowed-out dictionary. He hoped he wouldn't need it. But in Damascus, hope was a dangerous thing. The device Elias had given Karim was a marvel of Mossad engineering, developed by the technological unit known as the Institute for Special Operations. It mimicked the form factor of a standard fuel filter used in the Honda generators common in the Middle East. But the internal geometry was pure spycraft. The outer shell was aluminum, weathered to look used. Inside, however, there was no filter paper. Instead, there was a core of thermate TH3. Thermate is a variation of thermite, enriched with barium nitrate. When ignited, it burns at over 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It doesn't explode in the traditional sense. It melts. It cuts. But Elias needed an explosion to trigger the bomb Nabil was building. So, nested inside the thermate was a small blasting cap, wired to a thermal sensor. The logic was this. Karim installs the filter. The engineer, Nabil, tests the generator, as he inevitably would before the shipment. The engine heat warms the filter. At 180 degrees Fahrenheit, the thermal sensor trips. The thermate ignites, melting through the generator casing instantly. Milliseconds later, the blasting cap fires. The combination of extreme heat and the shockwave from the cap would set off the explosives Nabil was working on. The C4, the primers, the mercury switch, it would all go up. To the outside world, it would look like a tragic workplace accident. A generator malfunction sparking a fuel fire that ignited stored chemicals. Plausible deniability. But there was a variable Elias couldn't control. The chemistry of fear. The next morning, Damascus was hotter than usual. The sun was a white disk in a bleached sky. Elias sat in his office, pretending to review invoices. His heart rate was elevated. He was monitoring the audio feed from the bug in the wall. 09:00 a.m. Silence in room 4B. 09:15 a.m. The sound of a door opening. Rahim, where's the boy? I need coffee. Nabil, he is coming. Relax, Rahim. The wiring is done. We just need to pack it. Elias gripped the edge of his desk. Pack it. That meant they were closing the generator casing. If Karim didn't arrive in the next few minutes, the opportunity would be lost. Once the casing was sealed, the filter couldn't be swapped. 09:22 a.m. A knock on the door. Karim, Sabah al-Khair, coffee and the medicine. Elias leaned in, pressing the earpiece deeper. He could hear the tremor in Karim's voice. Would Rahim hear it? Rahim, you are late. Put it there. Leave. Karim, sir, the generator. It is leaking oil. On the floor. Smart kid. Elias smiled. He had coached him on this line, but delivering it to a terrorist with a gun required nerves of steel. Nabil, leaking, it's brand new. Karim, it is the filter cap. It looks loose. I can tighten it. I have a tool. Rahim, don't touch it. Get out. Nabil, wait. If it leaks oil, the engine will seize. We need it for the test. Let the boy fix it. It takes 2 seconds. A pause, a silence that stretched for an eternity. Rahim, fine, make it fast. If you break anything, I break you. Elias heard the clinking of metal, the sound of a wrench. He imagined Karim's hands. Were they shaking? Was he sweating? Clank, squeak, clank. Karim, done. It is tight now. Rahim, go. The door closed. Elias exhaled. The Trojan horse was inside. Now they just had to turn the key. But fate, as it often does in intelligence operations, threw a curveball. Nabil, Rahim, we don't need to test the generator here. We can test it at the safe house in the Golan. It's safer. Rahim, no. The buyer wants a video verification before shipment. We run it today, here. Soundproof room, no one hears. Elias froze. Video verification. That meant they would be standing right next to it, filming it. If they ran it now, the explosion would happen immediately. Elias checked the time. It was 09:30. Friday prayers, Jumu'ah, started at 12:00. The mosque would be filling up soon. If the bomb went off with thousands of people in the courtyard, the structural integrity of the North Annex might hold. But the panic? The stampede? Mossad's directive was zero collateral damage tolerance. If Karim had done his job, the device was primed. There was no remote kill switch. It was thermal. Once that engine started, there was no stopping it. Elias had to make a choice. Let it happen and risk a massacre in the panic, or find a way to delay the test until the prayers were over. He grabbed his phone. He needed a distraction, a reason for them to not turn that key for another 3 hours. He dialed the number for the Waqf administrative office, the legitimate side of the mosque management. This is Thomas Weber, he said, his voice urgent. I am detecting a massive electrical surge in the North Annex grid. You need to cut the power to that sector immediately, or we risk a fire in the historic archives. It was another lie. But cutting the power wouldn't stop the generator. It ran on gas. However, if the power went out, the lights in room 4B would go out. They couldn't film a verification video in the dark. Mr. Weber, we cannot just do it, Elias shouted. Or explain to the president why the Umayyad Mosque burned down on your watch. Click. 30 seconds later, the audio feed in Elias's ear went dead. The bug in the wall ran on the building's power supply. No, he had installed batteries. Why did the audio die? Then he realized. The electrical surge lie. The Waqf had pulled the main breaker, but they must have also engaged a signal jammer, or the breaker cut the specific circuit the bug was parasitic to, if the batteries failed. Or perhaps the thick walls and the sudden loss of background hum made the transmission fail. Elias was now deaf. He didn't know if the lights were out. He didn't know if they were starting the generator. He sat in the silence of his apartment, the sun beating down outside. The fuse was lit. He just didn't know how long it was.